What's up, everybody? Professor Kone here with another lecture, this time covering legislatures. As you already know, I like to play music for you, so I will be adding some music, of course, to the module. Alright, so after this lesson, you should have a better understanding of the following: the clash between representation, partisanship, and lawmaking, congressional membership and elections, gridlock, and be able to compare and contrast the California and national legislatures. So first, let's just begin with what is it that Congress does. Okay. Well, Congress, of course, and I would probably argue that many of you already know this, is that Congress does lawmaking. They create laws. Okay, the creation of policy to address the problems and needs of the entire nation, right? So it's a policy making, law-making body. And of course, what's important about lawmakers is their role in representation. Okay, so efforts by elected officials to look out for the interest of those who elect them. And simply put, representation, I mean, they represent the people who elect them, right? That is what they do. So part of what they do when they're out in the world is represent their constituents, right? The people that sent them off to their seat, wherever it may be. We also see that this role of partisanship, okay, partisanship is loyalty to a party that shapes how members see the world, how they define problems, and how they identify appropriate solutions, right, through the lens of the political party, right? So partisanship helps to dictate, or at least gives an indication of where people stand on things, as well as where they intend to go. And by that, I mean, what kinds of policy are they going to follow? What kinds of party agenda do they intend to pursue? And partisanship can be one way that we see where folks stand. All right, so there's a conflict between representation and lawmaking, right? Two of those things that we've just highlighted that are part of what representatives do, right? Their representation, okay, and lawmaking. So representation and lawmaking can conflict, okay, because there can be, for example, a conflict between the local good and the national good. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, what if there's something that's really important for your community, right? But what if that thing that is important for your community conflicts with the national good of the nation of the country? Okay. All right, so an example that comes to mind would be like coal mining, right? It's like communities that are dependent on coal mining, okay? So that a community that's dependent on coal mining, it's a local good that they continue in coal mining, right? However, that could conflict with the national good when you're thinking about the environment, right? So what's good for that local community isn't necessarily good for the nation. And you might have some other examples that, I mean, surely there are other examples here, but that is one that comes to my mind at the moment. So it can be difficult for members to fulfill their collective responsibility of national lawmaking, right? Particularly if you've been sent to Congress, for example, or the Senate, for example. So it can be hard to fulfill this responsibility to do what's best for the nation when you're also thinking about and trying to do right by, in a way, in a sense, we hope, by the community, by the constituents who sent one off to politics, off to government, rather. Okay. So this conflict really explains why Americans often hate Congress as a whole, but tend to love their own members of Congress, right? And to know who their members of Congress are, like them, while not necessarily liking how Congress runs as a Congress or the Senate, for example, run as a whole. The role of partisanship. Okay. Members of Congress juggle a commitment to the party with the need to represent voters. Okay. So that's like you are, for the most part, for a vast majority of folks, you're there and you are identified by your connection to your political party, but also needing to represent one's constituents, right? So partisanship coming in can potentially lead to conflicts there when it comes to representing one's local community. Okay. But political parties in the United States have varied over time in their polarization, right? So what is polarization? And we see it kind of described here in a comic, right? 2 + 2 = 4. No, you idiot. 1 + 3 = 4, right? And we see that they both have the right answer, but the way that they've gotten about to the solution is very different, or the way that they see the problem, rather, is different. And that highlights this idea of polarization. Okay, polarization is really highlighting the kind of space between the political parties, right? Parties are along a political spectrum, right? The more polarized parties become, that means the further apart they are. Okay, they're becoming more and more polarized. That means they're becoming further and further apart, right? An inability to kind of really see eye to eye with the other party. Okay. Let's see. I love to include comics here as a way for us to see what's happening in politics. So let's see, on the left-hand side, there's Uncle Sam-like person here, holding a sign saying, "Say no to violence. We are all Americans." And then in the little speaking bubble, it says, "Is that long enough? Can I get back to politics as usual now?" Which is really kind of illuminating, right? So if say no to violence, it's timely to think about. We might think about the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband, right? And the kind of response by the different parties about this attack and political violence, right? And so there's that sense of like, how long do we say we're going to be on the same page around saying no to violence? And then this little thought bubble saying, is that long enough? Can we get back to things as they're normal? Okay, here, and on the right-hand side, it says, the country is so divided politically that Tom and I disagreed on whether we could just agree to disagree. Interesting. So really trying to get at that, folks having different opinions, and do we get on the same page about having these different, very different perspectives or opinions? Can we agree to disagree, or where are we on our politics? All right, and let's check out this slide here on hyperpartisanship. Okay, hyperpartisanship. This can lead members to choose party over constituent, right? Remember, the constituent's the voter, or over the national interest. Right, so that's suggesting that political parties, right, can have this like extreme polarization, such that people will become so aligned with their party and will choose their party over the constituent, the voters, or the national interest, right, the interest of the country, right? So this is a big deal, this hyperpartisanship, and I think we could look to a lot of contemporary examples, right, where choosing party over constituent, the people, or over the national interest really highlights a potential danger to the nation via hyperpartisanship, right? Holding party above country, right, and above people that one represents. Okay, And partisanship or polarization is really very high. Not only are laws blocked, but so are executive appointments. I think that polarization is particularly high in this moment of the big lie and where people stand on the election, the presidential election, and belief in the big lie or not about how the election went. So these are just some examples. Really, I think we can highlight a lot of other examples of hyperpartisanship in this moment, and really can consider other risk of hyperpartisanship in this moment.